There you go.
Oh, hey guys. Good morning, Internet. Wake up. It's almost booze o'clock. And you don't want to be late for booze o'clock. Hi, I'm your host, Dave. Welcome back to the Noisy Barstool Presents. And today we're presenting Denmark. But before we get into that, a little backstory. In my last video, I told you that I was a bartender in New Orleans, and I bartend here. That's the Avenue Pub, New Orleans' 24-hour craft beer bar. Now, working in New Orleans is a good time. There's always something going on. There's music and dancing and parades, there's Mardi Gras, and I'm sure we'll do a whole episode on that. And on any given day, you could be walking through the park like I was and see something like this. Now, the thing the brochures don't tell you is that, well, sometimes New Orleans can look and sound like this. The rain started. They also don't tell you about the termites. Like, biblical swarms of termites. I'm serious, they're everywhere and they get into everything. It's gross. But anyways, when the rain falls and the customers dry up, it's kind of a good idea to get out of town. And working at the Avenue Pub has a lot of perks. It has a great whiskey selection, it's one of the best beer bars in the country, and sometimes we go on work trips. So, during the slow season, we hit the road. We go visit distillers and brewers, the people who make the product that we sell. We put a face to a name and it makes our job easier. I know, I kinda got a good gig. And this last trip, we went to Sweden and Denmark. And I figured y'all might want to come along. So, now with a little bit of context as to why a bunch of bartenders were wandering around Denmark and Sweden, let's go. So we closed down the bar, packed our bags, got up super early, stood in some lines, walked down some hallways, stopped for breakfast. Breakfast. Got on some planes, walked down some more hallways, stopped for real breakfast.
Not bad.
Got on a train, and then another plane, got delayed in Canada, had a Molson, cause, Canada, and finally boarded our plane for Europe, making the trip much more complicated than this graphic allowed. The next morning we arrived in Copenhagen, Denmark. Yes, Denmark, the land of Vikings and Lego. The final resting place of my dignity after a night at Tivoli Gardens. R.I.P. dignity. Oh, it's been a lot of drinking. When we landed, we made our way to the hostel, and after that, it was off to the pub for a lot of my compatriots. But I had something else in mind. I wanted to pay my respects to someone that I'd only ever read about. You see, before I was a beer nerd, I was a philosophy nerd. And Copenhagen is the final resting place of Søren Kierkegaard. So I decided to go kick it at the cemetery for a minute. I figured, what better way to air my grievances about a 14-hour plane flight with cranky managers and a bunch of coworkers than by going and spending some time with the father of existentialism. So my first stop was the Assistens Cemetery. The cemetery itself was opened in 1760, and it was originally a place to bury the poor outside the city limit. But as the city grew, so did the cemetery, and today people like Søren Kierkegaard or Hans Christian Andersen are resting there. And it's one of the most beautiful green spaces in the city. So if you have a free afternoon, I definitely suggest that you go and check it out. And if you feel like splurging, or if you're lucky and maybe a good eavesdropper, you might be able to catch a tour by one of the local historians. After the cemetery, it was time to rejoin my compatriots. So I stopped off at a little pub to pay my respects to the grandfather of Danish beer. But once that was out of the way, I decided to go introduce myself to its eccentric uncle. Our first official stop on this trip was at Mikkeller and Friends, a 40-tap room serving Mikkeller beer and beer from like-minded brewers. Now, Mikkeller probably doesn't need an introduction for any of my beer enthusiasts out there, but for any regular drinkers, Mikkeller was at the forefront of the Danish beer revolution, and if I'm being honest, makes some of the best dark beer and the best sours in the world. And to this day, Mikkeller is still pushing the industry in new and innovative directions, creating beer using various oddities, cherries, lychee, chili peppers, even mistletoe. What you also might not know about Mikkeller is a nomadic brewer. That means that he doesn't have a brick and mortar place that he brews year round, but rather he'll travel and brew in other people's setups, creating one-offs and collaborations along the way. It's pretty cool. Now, Mikkeller might not have a brick-and-mortar brewery, but they do have several tap rooms around the world, including some here in the States, I think in California and maybe one in New York. But if you can't find a tap room, you can usually find their beer at any of your specialty beer bottle shops around the city. And if you find one, you might as well pick one up, or pick 10 up. They're good. Especially if you can find the Brunch Weasel or anything from the Spontan Fruit series. That's fantastic. After Mikkeller, it was back to the hotel for some long-needed sleep and a bright and early morning. The next morning, we boarded a bus headed for Frederiksdal Winery. The winery is located 2.5 hours southwest of Copenhagen, right on the coast. Now, Frederiksdal estates have been standing in one form or another since the 1100s, and it's still currently a working farm and a delicious winery, specializing in making wine out of a tart Danish cherry, sometimes known by the misleading name, the Nordic grape. Frederiksdal produces a few different types of its cherry wine. They do some in stainless steel, they age some in oak. My favorite, the Rancio, is aged outside in glass balloons for 1.5 years. Then they bring it inside and age it in cognac for 6 months. The wine itself is a little sweet and viscous, but with ample time to breathe, the wine kind of transforms and you get these notes of black peppercorn and cinnamon and leather and a little vanilla. It's delicious. And while some people might be tempted to use it really merely as a dessert wine, winemaker Harold Kreber kind of pushes you to drink it alongside a meal, especially with something with like rich or gamey meats in it. While I agree with his assessment, you should pair it with something meaty or spicy or kind of like bold. The drink itself, the wine itself, is a pretty bold flavor. So give it the respect it deserves. You're not going to be able to have a glass of this and then switch to a cheap lager. You won't even taste the lager. What I would suggest is pairing it with a meal and then maybe having dessert and then finishing off the bottle toasting with your friends, almost like it's a port. Now at this point, we were a little boozed up and I didn't really get any interesting footage. Probably because I took a nap. But hey, I wasn't the only one. But I can assure you, the ride back was beautiful and calm and just as lovely as the ride there, and definitely not full of drunken, ornery bartenders who were definitely going to be hungover in the morning. But the next morning there was no time for hangovers, because it was our last day in Denmark, and we were going to go see our friends at Amager. But that's a story for a different day. For now, I think it's time to sign off. I'm Dave, your host, your personal bartender, and your traveling companion, and I invite you to join me next time when I'll be adventuring in Sweden. In fact, if you like this video enough to want to watch the next one, I invite you to like the video, subscribe to the channel, or hit the bell thing and keep updated on all things Noisy Barstool. And remember, if at the end of a very long journey, your glass ever looks half empty, that might mean you're just not drinking fast enough. Cheers.